Welcome to Living Outside the Matrix, the philosophy show where we explode the many modern myths of our culture and examine important issues that have a bearing on our lifestyle choices. Hi there, my name's Nigel Howitt, and on the show today we're going to discuss how you can avoid losing your eyesight as you get older, as you suffer from that long-sightedness or short-sightedness, how you can do that without reaching for glasses or using LASIK surgery. The Bates method, which is an alternative way of looking at not only how to remedy eye problems, but also how the eye functions. Nobody really needs to reach for a pair of glasses. Just recently, as I said, I interviewed David Glassman down in his home in North London. So I hope you get some value from this chat. Thank you so much for taking the time for joining us today, David, and a warm welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be invited.
Good stuff. Perhaps we could start by asking the question, why do we lose the ability to maintain a clarity of vision? Sometimes, of course, children lose their sight, but generally it's associated with old age. Why is that? What's happening to the eyes?
Why? Well, we could, it would be a whole cocktail of things. Basically, we start to use our eyes in a less than favourable way, and this begins to build up over time. There are certain myths that Dr. Bates said, he said, every day we opticians disprove our own theories, but we don't believe our own eyes. And this is what we're looking at really. What can actually happen? Okay, the answer isn't always glasses. In fact, he said it doesn't make sense because even on a medical basis, if something goes wrong and you start to heal it, so for example, if you break your leg, as it heals you don't need a stronger crutch and a stronger crutch. But with vision, you go into glasses and then you need stronger glasses and you need stronger glasses.
So it's not actually addressing the problem.
That's absolutely right. It's not addressing what could be the remedy, which we could learn at school, but instead, we don't look at those issues that might cause something. Yes.
What are these, should we call them malpractices, these wrong techniques of using the eye that creep in? Can they be summarised in a nutshell?
The main thing that Dr. Bates put the reason as failing eyesight down to was what he called the stare. It's the inactivity of the eye itself. The eye is designed to be moving all the time, and we stare. And especially even more so than in his day, because now we have computers, televisions, the books, we just stare at one distance.
Right, so there's a lack of focal range being exercised in the average person's sort of daily.
Absolutely, yeah.
Glued to the computer or reading a book or something. Yep.
Again, the kind of metaphor that I might use is that if I told you to pick up 10 telephone directories, big telephone directories, and walk about all day holding those, your muscles would start to become tight and less flexible, and we lose the flexibility of the muscles working. Yes.
What is going on with when we do? What's the term for losing sight? Is it presbyopia? I forget now.
Presbyopia is a particular type of losing sight, which I could explain more.
Yeah.
It is about a failing. So whether it's short sight, you're going short-sighted, long-sighted, which would either be natural long-sighted, which would be the changing of the eyeball itself, or what's called presbyopia, old people's long sight, which is where you lose flexibility of the muscles surrounding the eyes. Or astigmatism, where the muscles aren't working together.
Okay, so just so the listeners, astigmatism, and that's when one eye isn't seeing exactly or isn't offering the brain the same information as the other eye. Would that be fair to say?
Well, astigmatism.
The eyes aren't coordinated.
Well, there are 6 muscles that surround the eyes, And when they're working in tandem, they just move in and out themselves nice and easily. But if something actually then distorts them, it distorts the eye. Therefore, the eye isn't receiving straight lines, it's curvy lines or something like this. Mm-hmm. So you would, if you see a test for astigmatism, it would be like a circle with lots of lines going right through. The normal person would see this in a way equally. The lines would be equal, but with astigmatism, some would be stronger than others.
Okay, gotcha. So what is it that leads one person to short-sightedness and another to long-sightedness? For example, my wife is she can see everything up close. She can't see anything more than 20 feet away. and I you know, have sometimes struggled to see up close in poor light, but I can see perfectly well the distance. So what happens there with one person developing one and the other person developing another? Seemingly opposite symptoms.
I wouldn't say there's any one particular thing, but there are common factors. One of those, well, the short-sighted person, okay, again, might be looking at a book for too long at one distance, and therefore the muscles become more and more rigid. It's the actual shape of the eye that dictates it. Okay, so the myopic person, the short-sighted person, the eyeball is longer back to front. Mm-hmm. Okay, whereas with somebody who's hypermetropic, long-sighted, it will be more flatter. Mm-hmm. Okay. But really, it's the muscles that actually change the eyes.
This is where I want to drill in, because the conventional view of the way the eye focuses, and please stop me if I'm wrong, I gather it's largely the Hermann Helmholtz, this German scientist in the 19th century, who came up with the theory that the ciliary muscle around the lens constricts to alter the convexity of the lens. So as it squeezes in, it becomes more convex, and you can focus on things nearer to. And yet, as I'm sure you're about to mention, these muscles around the eye, the recti muscles and the oblique and superior obliques, I can't remember what they're called, but there's another theory of explaining how the eye focuses that involves those muscles. Would you want to elaborate on that?
Well, I'm glad you said theory, because my understanding is that Helmholtz was given this, and he worked on this theory to be a theory to be worked on. But it seems that, yes, it was taken then as fact. Mm. And Dr. Bates actually disproved this, and he disproved it in a way that if somebody was actually suffering from a cataract and had a cataract, the lens removed, as they did in those days, he could still teach them to actually accommodate, which is seeing near far, changing the focus.
Yes.
Okay. It may not have been as effective, but if the Helmholtz theory was absolute, then this couldn't happen.
No, Helmholtz theory also supposes that it's age related, isn't it? Because the theory goes on to show that as we get older, the lens becomes more rigid, allegedly, and so there's more difficulty in squishing it into greater convexity, and thus but of course, you get young children of 14 and 15 that have the same eye problems. So that theory would tend to be, or that idea tends to be negated, doesn't it? And also the idea of putting, is it atropine, the stuff in the eye to paralyse the ciliary muscle, and then people can still focus. There's a number of holes, isn't there, in that theory?
Absolutely. And I would say that nowadays many people working in the optical trade are actually discovering what he discovered all those years ago.
So is it fair to say that the conventional mainstream view of how the eye focuses is still the Helmholtz version, and therefore an incorrect view of how the eye is focusing?
I would say so. And it's a matter of the brain. I mean, this is, again, it's something that he discovered very early on, that the brain works, our nerves and muscles works the eyes, works the muscles, the nerves and the muscles. So what actually would happen is that these muscles would be flexing all the time. And when it comes to focusing, the muscles would actually then, if you're actually looking at something near, the two eyes would converge. So they're looking at something and focusing on that.
Yeah.
When they look out into the distance, they diverge. Roughly at about 20 feet from then on, they run parallel. Which is why when somebody gets this age-related, the presbyopia, at first they can see just as well at a distance.
Right.
But it's the actual focusing of the muscles coming together, bringing the eyes to come together,
Yes.
that is the actual problem. Dr. Bates himself was diagnosed as being presbyopic. He was told that his lens was as hard as a stone, and he overcame that working on himself.
Why is it that glasses don't work? Why is it that you just continually pushing the problem a bit further away, effectively, aren't you? You need a stronger and stronger prescription, as you mentioned. What is it that the glasses are obviously correcting and making some sort of adjustment with the lens? What is it they're not doing? What's the real nature of the problem?
It's a function of the brain. So if I'm actually looking at something, okay, that's near, okay, then my eyes go into this myopic shape. When our eyes are healthy, the muscles around the eyes are healthy, then if I go to look into the distance, the muscles change the shape of the eye, and then you can see out further. But if they have become less flexible, so they're in the shape looking near, and then you go to look into the distance, but the nervous system, the nerves and the muscles don't react as quickly as they did before. When you're looking at something far, they're still not in the shape to focus out into the distance.
Right. Yeah. I've noticed this with myself actually. If I spend a lot of time at a computer focusing near, I might sort of walk outside or something, or shift my activities so I need to look further in the distance, and I'm noticing it's blurry until I regather myself, if you like, and make an effort to sort of relax my eyes and just recover the situation, as it were. So my eyes are then adjusting to the long distance. So I've noticed that personally through experience. So that seems to ring true.
So the way I see it as well, we know that if we get under a stressful situation, or we're trying too hard, the muscles contract. Any muscle, the shoulders, breathing, whatever. Also with the eyes.
Yeah.
So it might be that a child might be at school, and they might be getting nervous, or they might be trying to see the blackboard, and this strain then takes them into this myopic shape. So at that particular time, they're stressed. When they go outside, they relax, and then they see perfectly. But they have this situation, so the teacher might tell the parents take the child to an optician.
Yeah.
We go to the optician. What happens at the optician? It's like a test again, which we've got to get right. So we get nervous, so we reproduce this stress. We reproduce the eye going into that particular shape.
Okay. So the stress is affecting the muscles, the recti muscles and the muscles that move the eye around. The stress is causing them to sort of tense up.
Absolutely, as in every part of our body. Yeah.
Yeah.
The eyes are no different in this respect. So then the optician will give you the old test, what's better, with a lens, A or B, and then give you a prescription for that particular, if I call it an ailment, for that particular focusing difficulty.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the glasses arrive, and then if the kid puts the glasses on, maybe if he's totally relaxed now, he's not going to see clearly because they're designed for that myopic shape.
Right.
So the brain then it's a fantastic computer, and it will scan and for its memories and go, oh yes, I remember that time. What I had to do was, and then your neural system will reproduce that harmful effect that needed the correction at that particular time. And then that grows and grows. That's why people then need to go into stronger glasses and stronger glasses.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, LASIK surgery, which is some people's solution, which is just cutting the eye into a permanent glasses prescription, essentially, for those that haven't heard of it. LASIK surgery is not a solution either, is it? Because it's just like having a fixed pair of glasses, and sure enough, you need a stronger prescription after a year or however long it takes, and you're in the same problem, aren't you?
Yes, again, my understanding on this, it really follows the Russian operation from years ago. Very, very skillful. But it was them and myopic people, so they would then cut, they'd make the cuts to correct the shape of the eye, what they call correct, okay?
Like it's faulty.
Yeah. So at first, it seems fine.
Yeah.
But then the brain begins to reproduce what it was doing before. And that could be done a few times until you could no longer do it anymore. You know, the trouble with laser in this way is that it can be harmful, and if it is, then you can't undo that harm. So many people have benefited. If they do benefit, I believe they could do it with more natural ways of helping themselves. But certainly if they adopt the harmful things that have happened, like rings around the eyes, etc., you can't undo that.
Okay. So just to come back to the shall we call it the alternative view of how the eye focuses, the non-mainstream view that Bates was an advocate of, and I don't think he came up with it, did he? Somebody a century or so before. But this idea that the recti muscles, which are the muscles that sort of run sort of from front to back, broadly speaking, and there's a couple that go over the top of the eye, aren't there?
Yeah.
So if stop me if I'm wrong, but essentially I believe that if all four of these recti muscles, which can otherwise be used to steer the eye around, of course, within the socket, if they all pull together, you get the eyeball sort of squished back into a slightly compressed shape that way, or certainly not elongated. And then the two muscles that would go over the top can work they work together to sort of squish the eyeball into a sort of a zeppelin shape, slightly front to back, which is the focusing in the near view. So is that a fair sort of summary of roughly the alternative explanation of how the eye works?
You've got the muscles, yes, that surround the eyes. And muscles can work and they function in different ways. One of them will be changing the shape of the eye for accommodation, the seeing near and far, focusing.
Yeah.
Okay. And that will involve the other process of not changing the shape of the eye, but converging and diverging. Muscles can only do one thing effectively at a particular time. And if they're working to do one particular thing and you try to get them to do something else, they're not going to be working so effectively. And this is the whole point of this. The whole issue that Dr. Bates began to work on more and more, and that we do, is about relaxation. Okay. Muscles work far better and are far more flexible when they're in and what Aldous Huxley would have referred to very much as dynamic relaxation.
Right.
Becoming more like a spring rather than a tight muscle that is stretching.
Yes. Dr. Willie Bates also mentioned the idea of trying to see more of a particular object at a distance than the focal point would allow, if I understood him correctly. So, for example, if you're looking at 100 yards away and you see a car, You might, instead of drilling down onto any particular point and sort of moving the focal point around the detailed parts of that car to sort of sketch it, as he would say, there's a tendency to sort of zone out slightly, sort of almost defocus, to see the whole object at once. Is that a fair analysis of what he was talking about? That was kind of what I read into it, and it seemed to me that this could become habitual. So we might find ourselves looking at things and almost teach ourselves to just come out of focus in order to see more of the object, see in inverted commas, more of the object by out of focusing the eye slightly. Is that an accurate summary of what Bates was on about?
When you've got something near, then the healthy eye will make lots of little skips. Yeah. As if it's just pointing around something very, very fast.
Yes.
Very, very fast. Too fast for the conscious brain to understand it. And you will see this in someone. You won't necessarily see the eye moving, but you will see like a glint, a healthy glint. The eyes look alive.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at something near, then you have to make more skips around to actually reproduce what's called a saccadic movement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just going around and around. Okay, if you're looking out into the distance, then you don't need to make so many big skips around.
No.
So the eye can be just working in this particular way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always about reproducing something, and again, as I say, the eyes run in parallel to see right out into the distance and recognize things.
Yeah.
But it's a function again of the brain. When we come to relaxation, especially, well, Huxley would have referred to dynamic relaxation. A lot of the time, what we do these days, we equate relaxation with really what is collapse. I get into this big lush chair, I collapse into it, I feel relaxed. It's a thought. But our body's working very hard to overcome the way that the natural body should be in supporting itself. Dynamic relaxation, well, that would be that cat that's on your lap and looks asleep, and suddenly the back legs go in and it's off.
Yeah.
It's that child, that toddler, you see the life within them. That is the dynamic relaxation that should be working all the time.
Right. Okay.
So it is so important, and this is sometimes why there's the misinterpretation of what Dr. Bates was actually getting at, really.
Mm-hmm.
It is about relaxation.
Right.
And if anybody ridicules the benefits of relaxation, they need to be questioned very, very seriously.
Yeah, no, well, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it, in light of what you're saying about how the eye works and these muscles and how they can lock up if they're held at the same focal distance all the time.
Absolutely,
there's one more aspect of how the eye focuses that I think might be worth mentioning for listeners, and that's the analogy to a camera, because just before we move completely away from this Helmholtz theory of how the eye focuses, a camera, as photographers may know, the lens generally has a fixed focal length, and the distance between the lens and the film is varied. And it has been proposed that this is precisely how the eye works in the way you're suggesting, with this elongation of the eyeball and so forth.
The most important thing really is, as my main trainer, Miss Sage, would always have said, seeing has got nothing to do with the eyes. It's a function of the brain. The brain works our whole neurology. Mm. We just couldn't understand enough to be able to fully answer all the questions. Mm-hmm. We're looking at, yes, there will be these changes that come about, but the brain wants to identify things and make sense of the world. So this is why sometimes, we, for example, might look at a cloud moving across and, well, it looks like the shape of a little old lady or something like this, or a fold in a curtain,
Yeah.
These are the things. And therefore the brain will dictate to, what are the possibilities? Because it's only a guess. Mm. When we look at something, it's only a guess. We look through that fantastic computer that we've got, the brain, and it tries to match things up. Sometimes it misfires. But if we keep misfiring, then we've got the problem.
What is it about the point that when we're watching films or TV screens at this fixed distance, and we might be watching a film, you're of course taking in the whole scene. If you're watching a screen that's, say, it's a couple of meters away from you, and in actual fact, the eye is having to focus 2 meters away, isn't it? And yet it's being fooled into thinking there's depth of field. Is there a complication going on there that disturbs the eye's mode of use?
We can trick ourselves into seeing it. It's like with the painting. I've got Constable's painting up there, and you've got several trees, one behind another. Okay. Mm-hmm. But really, you're just looking at like flat canvas. It's all the same. It's a trick, but it works, so and it's a healthy trick.
Assembling the picture for us, essentially.
Absolutely. I mean, the brain is an incredible thing. I remember on television some years ago with Graham Garden, who had an audience. Now, some of them were prepped before. They were given glasses which actually inverted the image. They had worked with this sometime before the program. So the brain actually adapted and got used to seeing it upside down, which we do in any case, but it had done it, So, okay, then they gave some other people the glasses for the first time. And they gave them a glass and a bottle filled with water. And they were told to just fill the glass with the water. The ones who had been prepped, they could do it. Mm-hmm. But the others just couldn't do it at all because the brain just didn't understand what was going on. Yeah. So this is why the brain adapts very quickly and will, even in a bad circumstance, will do the best thing for you. Mm. But this is the incredible thing about vision. We really, whatever comes to us, comes upside down, and the brain turns
upside
it
down
around.
Back to front, yeah.
Yeah.
Because of the way that the, in case any listeners haven't considered that, it's the way that the light comes in through the eye, and of course it crosses over, doesn't it, and forms a negative image on the back.
If anybody makes like a little gap, they should see through that gap clearer, unless they've got absolutely brilliant eyesight, in which case it wouldn't make any difference. Okay, but they would see that clearer, whatever they're looking at. Mm-hmm. So this is the point as well, that to see clearly, we only see clearly at a very, very small distance, and only for a very, very short time. Yeah. What happens is what's called saccadic movement, that the vision is always moving in and out, round and round, and everything like this. So very, very fast. As I say, too fast for the conscious brain. Yeah. So yes, if you they did it in the old days by having a card and making little pricks in it. Yeah. Okay. Today you can get pinhole glasses, yes. And that's exactly what it does. It sends the rays more finite, so they're more clear. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing around those holes, the brain is working it out.
Okay. The Bates method is an alternative thing we can do, isn't it? Rather than reaching for glasses that as we discussed, they don't actually eliminate the problem. So what's the essence of the Bates method to somebody who's not heard about it before?
I would define it as re-education through relaxation, and relaxation through re-education. Yeah. It is learning to see in a different way. Many people think it's about exercises. Well, exercises can help, but only if they do it in the right way. Mm-hmm. It is a change in the way you actually see. For example's sake, if you're looking at one particular thing for too long, say you're looking at the keyboard of a computer, and then you look to the screen, okay, then, okay, if you've been looking at the keyboard, say, or a book that's down there, and then you go to the screen, yeah, your eyes have maybe been in this position for too long. So it's to build in changing focus as much as you can. And a lot of the exercises can very much help in this particular way. Improving the focal length, the flexibility of that, including the saccadic movement. So this would be the eyes moving around, would actually then exercise the cells. The cells all around the eyes. The inactivity would do exactly the opposite to the cells. The way that I would liken it is if a woman in high heels, the stiletto heels, would tread on your toe, you would feel it, all that weight coming down to one point.
Yeah.
And that is what tends to happen that can burn that cell out. If it's moving around the eye, the healthy eye, unconsciously at that rate that it should do, then it's stimulating them into good health.
Okay, so he's very much relaxation focused.
Absolutely.
And as you mentioned already, it's about the brain seeing more than just the eye, the way we use the eye. What of this technique that he referred to as sketching? Can you elaborate on that?
Some have called it sketching, right? But it's actually getting the whole eye process moving. So we would do this by shifting. Now, if I did it in a way, say for example's sake, if I'm going to sketch you, so I imagine a pen and I'm going around your face and I'm moving like, you know, just the physical movement, okay, I can be still in strain. It's a process of the brain.
Okay.
So I like to make fun of it. So I would imagine maybe what I call Bates fleas, and I imagine, like at the moment I'm looking at you and I'm looking at your eyebrows and I'm imagining 2 Bates fleas over one eye and 2 on the other playing a game of table tennis. And I'm doing this with the brain, and this would encourage the saccadic movement. If I'm doing it by actually focusing on these balls with intensity, then I can be doing harm.
Okay, so you've become counterproductive again as soon as it starts to, you're drilling in and staring.
Absolutely, yes. And this is why in some of the books, if you follow those exercises and you just do it in that particular way that's been causing your problems, then you're going to just, well, make perfect those problems. You're going to be working on them and working on them. So it needs to be done in a particular way.
Okay, so it sounds to me like sketching it's about this, what did you call it, the movement? It's not circadian.
Circadian movement.
So it's about all these tiny movements that the eye should be making.
You can't make saccadic movement happen. What you can work on is undoing what stopped it in the first place, and that's what we would be working on.
Stress.
The stress would be the strain of holding the eyes, yes, which we don't realise we're doing. And this is the fascinating thing about it. When I'm working with people, feeding back and doing certain routines with them that makes them begin to understand what they're doing incorrectly.
Bates has some other techniques, doesn't he? He has palming and sunning. Perhaps we can, I'll explain ever so briefly. Palming is essentially, covering the eye socket with the palm in a specific way, a little bit more carefully done than that. And this is a technique for relaxation as well, is it?
Well, Dr. Bates discovered that the relaxed brain will see black. Described in those days, black as like printer's ink. If it's different, he would say that it's a sign of stress. So one of the things is, yes, palming. Now, in the early days, when he was pioneering things, he would then get people to think black, see black. Now, unfortunately, the book that he wrote in 1919, 1920, that came out then, it infers really that palming, you relax, see black, see black, see black. He never revised the book himself. The revised edition will be revised by other people, not by him. He revised his thinking and elaborated on his thinking in his journals. So one of the things that we do today is we actually will put people into a palming position and to get them to think of nice, pleasant things, moving things. And if you're doing this in a relaxed manner, it's going to teach the brain how to bring about relaxation and seeing in relaxation again. It's far more effective. One of the things when I started to teach was I thought people would just take to palming. But not always. It needs to be something that is actually relaxing for the person. And many people will start off, and that the hardest thing for them to ever do is to begin to relax, because it feels boring or something like that. There's no point in it.
I love it. I must admit, I do. I quite often, assume this kind of position and sit back on my sofa and relax. And it's funny that I might even be leaning forward. And the first thing my wife will say is, "Oh, Nigel, you were right," because she think I'm, head in hands in despair. But in fact, it's very, very relaxing and
That comes into it. Yes, yes.
And then what about sunning? So sunning is essentially with all the appropriate caution, of course. It's sort of availing your eyes to the sunlight. So how would you describe sunning?
What we would do is, again, we would gently close our eyes, although I should use the term close the lids. It's impossible to close the eyes. And then you would look at maybe the sun or a good light, and you would swing your head one way or the other. Then the light would permeate, filtered through the lids, and start to stimulate the cells.
Okay.
If even that was too bright for you, you would then dim it, and this would begin to build up in time. What you don't want to do is to strain, so to force yourself into doing something. Again, that could do harm.
Yes.
So it's very, very gently, and you would need, this is why it should never be just one answer. Because for one person, a certain thing will work, for another person it won't work yet. So we have to actually look and feed back. If I'm working individually with someone, I will want to take a case history and I'm observing them. If it's through a group or something like that, you can't have that same one-to-one contact. So you have to get the ideas over more. But caution certainly is the way that I would always work. Now, then it's a good thing to actually complement it with palming. Sun, palm, sun, palm. And you get that contrast, and it works nicely in that. The other thing about it is, well, people that suffer from depression and they have maybe the light box and they need to do this an hour or 2 hours a day to function. Well, by actually moving and getting the light going through the eye, working to the brain, this is what it will do as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've tried sunning, on the beach when I'm on holiday. It's a perfect time to do it, and I found it very relaxing to sort of look or turn my head towards the sun with my eyelids closed, and sort of prescribing figure of eights and things like that. I find that very relaxing. I've heard it said also that there are benefits of these natural broad range of frequencies coming from the sun, obviously. Full spectrum. Some of these frequencies entering into the eye, not the components of white light. Obviously, you wouldn't never want to actually look at the sun. So there are benefits of these other wavelengths. Am I right in thinking that?
I would always refer to someone who's a specialist on that. I wouldn't feel qualified enough to actually work with the individual spectrums or to say this will do this or that will do that. But in general, if you're sensible, now for example's sake, if the eye isn't well trained, we would always say if you're going to be sunning, avoid the midday hours of the summer because there can be too much infrared, too much ultraviolet in it. So the morning or when the sun's going down later are the best times to actually do the sunning with the real sun.
Well, that makes sense. And also, I mean, this is in the context of modern light bulbs. We've now got LED light bulbs. We've obviously had fluorescent light bulbs for some time. And the old tungsten filament incandescent light bulbs are being phased out. And, it has been suggested that this is very unfortunate because the tungsten filament light bulb emits a nice full range spectrum, which is good for the eye, whereas the LED lights tend to emit a much more dense blue spectrum, which has other complications with sleep and not really so much to do with the focus of the eye. What can you tell us about the correct reading technique? Did Bates advocate one?
Well, again, there are many different techniques on reading. Okay? And again, what we would do is to undo what somebody is doing, so it should be natural. Okay, some people can do speed reading, but then what is speed reading?
Well, I gather some speed reading instructional courses actually encourage you to see more words at once, so see blocks of words, which sounds to me like it's exactly not. It sounds like that's the opposite of what Bates was suggesting. With the the sketching and the moving the eye around.
Yeah. So I would have to see what somebody is doing rather than what they're saying. Right. Because if the eye is moving very, very rapidly, it can actually do this. There is a process called photo reading, which actually then you are taking in a whole picture. But it's working on a very different level because it sends messages to the unconscious brain.
Is it using the peripheral vision?
You're using peripheral vision in that, yeah. So it's one of brain and then interpreting. So it's like taking a photograph and then recalling that photograph. Right? Okay. As opposed to the speed reading, which is exactly what you said. You're trying to see too many things at one time. As I say, vision is just to be able to see at a very small distance and only for a short time. It moves so fast. And we won't consciously know what the difference is, but the techniques that we would actually show you, for example's sake, encouraging maybe seeing a little black dot moving underneath the letters. Okay, and if you practice this, it helps on what's called shifting, like you mentioned about sketching. So this is unconscious. As it moves one way, the letters should appear to move the opposite way.
Sorry, just to interject there, is shifting the same as sketching then, just in case any listeners are confused about that? Are they the same thing, this moving the eye around, moving the point of focus around, shall I say? Sketching and shifting, are they synonymous?
I would say that sketching induces shifting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, therefore, shifting allows, what some people would call sketching. So again, it's a matter of what the person is actually doing. If you're trying to do it, it's unlikely to work. Because again, most of what we do, it's an unconscious process. Dr. Bates said, it's not scientific. The healthy eye moves not less than 70 times in a fraction of a second. That's too fast for the conscious brain to take it in. So we're relying upon things for our brain to work it out.
Given what we've discussed about the way the eye focuses, would you say it's a good idea to look long and then to sort of focus up close and then to focus at a distance again? Is that a useful technique that anybody could, or useful habit, should we say, of using the eye that anybody could pick up on? Would that benefit the average person and perhaps forestall age-related loss of vision clarity?
Yes.
In a word, yes.
Yes, I mean, this is the thing. That if you do it, if, say for example's sake, and I'm holding my finger up and looking at you now. If I hold my finger up, now as I look at my finger, I can see two of you. My peripheral vision is taking that up.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if I look at you, then I see two fingers. Now, if I float between one and the other, this is a healthy way of actually inducing the healthy muscle movement. But if I jump from my finger out to you and jump back again and jump out to you and then back again, then my muscles are staying more in contraction and I'm stretching those muscles, and that can be harmful.
Okay, so it'd be better to sort of slide your focus in and out, as it were, rather than look immediately into the distance to looking up close to looking in the distance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is what I would emphasise when I'm teaching people, so that they can actually experience it themselves, because it's all very well whatever I say, it's about what you experience and how we can actually teach you to do these things for yourself and give feedback on what can actually happen.
Yeah.
The same as if I'm looking at you, and if I now look to the right of you, but I'm trying to see you at the same time as what I'm seeing to the right, that's too much for the eye to be able to take in. So if I'm now, again, thinking of maybe extension of my nose, what I call a nose brush, and I just let the brush go to the right, then you should appear to move to the left. Okay? If I want to see what I'm looking at now, I have to give permission not to see you clearly. If I'm trying to hold on to both, and I won't necessarily know I'm doing this, okay, if I'm trying to hold on to both, that is not the way the eyes are developed to see in humans.
One thing I've noticed with my own becoming more aware of how I use my eyes since discovering the Bates method is that if I'm doing an activity like washing up, so I'm bent over, it's something that we all do probably several times every day. See, I'm bending down, washing up, I'm doing an activity roughly at arm's length, and I notice myself while I'm cleaning whatever, forks and plates and things, that I'm not looking at anything specific. I'm not looking at any tiny part of the fork or that particular bit of the plate. And what I notice, rightly or wrongly, is that my eyes tend to sort of zone out, and I tend to sort of look at a sort of a general place where my hands are active. Does that make any sense to you? I wonder if it makes any sense to any listeners. But I've noticed that I caught myself doing this, in other circumstances as well in the day, if I'm a bit tired and maybe I just sort of catch myself where my eyes have alighted on something, but they're not really focused on it. I'm not really tuned in. Is that a component of many of your patients? Is that a normal thing? And if so, is it part of the problem?
Seeing should be effortless. Any attempt to see will create a strain and therefore impair vision. So it's this magical thing. You can't exactly put your mind on it and say exactly what it is, because it moves too fast. So here, if I was looking at a plate, this would be the more important thing. If I'm looking at a plate, and then maybe I look a little bit behind the tap or something, again, from what we were saying before, do I feel that it just slides out to the tap and then maybe slides back to the plate? Now that would be working it in a much healthier way. Okay? And you're then programming your brain to tell it what to do. And it's more like when you actually get a flash of something. So when I'm looking back at the plate, I didn't notice that bit of dirt on it before, but now I've come back from the tap. That dirt stands out proud. This is what we would be actually doing. So this is the whole thing about the effortless seeing.
Mm.
Once you try to see something.
Well, if I could just interject there, what I find is that it is hard work to if you bothered to focus on something specific, on all those utensils and plates and cups and things that it's just like I don't need to. What I observe in my own behaviour, and I stress it's only me. I'm not I haven't spoken to many other people about this. Is that I catch myself defocused, and then if I think, I've zoned out there, I'm not looking at anything, and if I then deliberately, and I don't mean really trying to, I just mean look at something, focus on something, attend to something somewhere in that scene of the sink. It could be a bubble, it could be a bit of dirt on the edge, something. As soon as my eyes lock on, if you like, into focus something, then all of a sudden it all comes back again. But there's a tendency, when you're sort of grabbing at things and you're giving a quick rinse, blah blah blah, and there's the next one. I find that maybe I'm the only person that experiences that, but I find myself sort of not bothering to attend to make my eye focus specifically.
And that is what Dr. Bates said all those years ago. Mind wandering. Okay, of course, if I'm doing the washing up, my mind will wander, and then the brain's receiving different signals.
Mm.
But if I played around with it, tried to count the bubbles in the soap or something like this, if you make fun of it, you make a game of it, then it makes it easier. And this is where the seeing effortless comes in.
Yeah.
And yes, I see that. Okay. And sometimes, we catch something in our peripheral vision. Was it this or was it that? It's a total thing, and that's why, again, the Bates method focuses more on the mental side of seeing rather than anything else. If we change our mental state, we change what we see. If we change what we see, we change our mental state.
Absolutely. So that leads in quite nicely to what is the connection between being mentally focused, i.e., we all know when you sort of park your mind in neutral and you're not really thinking of anything. Is there a connection between being mentally focused and sort of focusing your mind and focusing the eye? Is there a connection there? Is that what Bates was alluding to?
Well, again, you'd have to go and define what the word focus is. So I can over-focus. So if I stare at you, then I start to lose sight of what is around you. Mm-hmm. But if I'm looking at you and then I'm looking at you in relation to the wall behind you, that's activating the brain into that difference.
Yes. And
I'm taking in certain things. It's a matter of, well, as I say, it's changing the habits of a lifetime often. Mm. And this can be done in a healthy way or an unhealthy way. It's about what you can do at a particular time. And why, again, if you do this kind of work, you not only get better vision, you start to feel better yourself.
Yeah.
So it's a holistic approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things I noticed, again, from my own experience when I became interested in observing how I was using my eyes, was that often when I would speak to somebody, and here we are talking with about a metre or so between our faces, maybe a little bit more, and I've found myself when talking to people that I'd be sort of focused on a spot sort of roughly in front of their face, but not actually focusing again on any specific part of their face. Whereas I now, incorporating some of the things that you've said, make a deliberate habit of sort of looking at various bits of detail all around the face. So not actually locking eye contact, because socially, some people either maintain eye contact, others, seem to struggle with it. But maybe those that think maintaining eye contact is important overly sort of lock on to it, don't they? Because you talked about the playing a game with fleas, playing ping pong across your eyebrows. That sounds like a great way to get the eye to be mobile around the face and to keep moving around. And I've definitely noticed since doing that, a far better clarity and not a sort of fixed stare. So that's very much helped me.
Yes, because again, the subject can just mushroom out into other things as well. And Dr. Bates was very instrumental in the eye detection tests. Okay, could tell when somebody was lying or not, because this is one of the main things. The eyes are an extension of the brain.
What is it about poor light conditions that make it harder for the eye to focus?
So I suppose good light throws up more contrast, so it makes it easier in this particular way, but you can still be in strain. To be relaxed, that was the exercise that he would do. If you could see fine print in dim light, then your eyes, it was as if it's feedback to say you're relaxed.
So it's to do with the degree of strain that's going on, isn't it? Because obviously in bright light conditions, the pupil can narrow, and that obviously facilitates a sharper focus anyway.
Yes, that will come in, but again, it's a whole process. So the muscles, will shrink it down. I mean, we were designed in a very, very nice way, but we've interfered with it. We're not designed to have flat walls around us and things like this. We're designed that the eyes are moving all the time, the brain is moving all the time.
It does make sense, doesn't it, that the muscles that work the eye, just like you might work an arm muscle, this is moving through full extension to full contraction, and if our eyes get in the habit of only looking at a certain fixed distance, it's like only walking around with your arms locked in one particular place, isn't it? It would be analogous to that, and you'd expect problems to set in, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, as I said, the example of the telephone directories, or if I said to you, right, okay, well, what I want you to do is, I've got this stone here, I want you to put it in your shoe and walk around for the next 2 weeks, right, with the stone in your shoe. You come back, and then I say, okay, you can take the...
You've developed a limp.
You'd have developed that limp,
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the way the brain works. Therefore, you try and justify the way that it works. But it's the fun of removing the stone, which, it has to be done within, everybody's different. And this is why, when I'm working with people, I'm not working with eyes, I'm working with people. We're all different.
Absolutely. The holistic approach, dealing with the whole person. Where might people be able to contact you? I mean, are you you're available as a practitioner here in North London? How might people, any listeners in the London area, contact you, David?
Well, I work from my home, which is near Golders Green, or I work in the city. We have a practice at Old Street. I teach the Alexander technique as well, and I work with other Alexander teachers there, and if someone comes for the Bates, then I work with them. Often there might be some commonalities that will spread over both. We have our association, the Bates Association of Vision Education. There's a list of teachers that have been through and approved. Okay.
You mentioned a couple of excellent books. Perhaps you could, to me earlier you did at least, could you make some suggestions to the listeners? I believe one of them was an Aldous Huxley book.
There are some very, very good books on the subject. My favourite would be The Art of Seeing by Aldous Huxley, and Help Yourself to Better Sight by Margaret Darst Corbett. She, in fact, was Huxley's teacher.
Ah, okay.
And if you read her book, with each chapter, she gives a quote from various people. And I think it's in 2 of them she actually quotes Huxley. And for the master to quote the pupil, I think is a lovely thing. It's a lovely book. Then, if there's anything missed on that, The Bates Method by Peter Mansfield is a very good book that also brings in other disciplines as well.
Thank you so much for giving us your time today, David Glassman. I really appreciate that. Well, there you have it. And thank you so much to David for sharing all his knowledge and experience there. I do hope this is food for thought for you, and that maybe you might be inspired to find out how you can, more and more, if you have glasses already, put the glasses back in their box and use the eyes in a slightly different way so that you can hang on to that most precious of senses, your eyesight. Thank you very much for listening, and please visit the website lawfulrebel.com for loads more useful topics such as these to help you thrive, help you think outside of the box. But meanwhile, I do hope you'll join me for another episode of Living Outside the Matrix.
Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see.